was on. It was on a Wednesday night, and so we had prayer meeting that night. And I couldn't get in my room to get clothes, so I just had my athletic shorts on, a t-shirt, and I went to church anyway, and I just kind of sat in a corner and cried. And afterward, I remember someone coming up and hugging me and saying, "I'm praying for you," and I'm thanks and stuff. Marriage is hard, and it's two sinners living together, going through difficult times. Forgiveness is hard. Please forgive me, and yes, I forgive you are some of the hardest words to say. 2 years into our marriage, we were getting ready to go to Brazil, and so we needed to sell Sarah's 1983 Porsche that she had. She had bought it for 3,000. It was about to be vintage, so I thought it would go for 3,000. Nothing. 2,000. Nothing. Someone offers 1,000. It's like, no, not 1,000. Finally, someone liked the price at 1,600. Went for a test drive. Said he liked it. He was planning on buying it. He just wanted to take it home for the weekend and see his mechanic friend, make sure it was okay. And he would leave his very new Honda Accord with us, and so we were like, yeah, let's do that. And Sarah's like, no, I don't have a good feeling about this. And it's like, there's no one else that wants to buy this, and just I think we need to do it. So we did. He doesn't come back, but the repo guys come back, and he had totaled the Porsche, driving drunk, and yeah, it was bad. It took Sarah some time to forgive me for that one. Couple weeks. That was early in our marriage, and that was a tough one. Forgiveness is expensive. Someone's got to pay. We'll either force the offender to pay his debt of pain or material things that may have cost us, or we will choose to assume the debt and forgive it. It is saying, yes, this was wrong, but you don't owe me anything. It's forgiven. That's tough because someone's paying. It's like when student loans are forgiven, someone paid for them. Same thing with forgiveness. When sin is forgiven, someone had to pay. So forgiveness is a threefold promise. I promise to release this to God and not keep thinking about this offense. I promise to not keep talking about it to you or to others. I promise to never use this against you in the future. So some promises that are made in forgiveness, and that is tough. Forgiveness isn't always just a one and done type deal. We choose to forgive, but then we realize I need to keep forgiving here because I didn't really forgive. A great parable on this is Matthew 18:23 through 35. Just very helpful for the gospel to give us eyes to see and hearts to listen. It's the king that forgives the servant. The servant owes an insurmountable debt. He begs for mercy, and the king forgives him. He forgives that debt. He's so grateful, but then he goes out and he finds a servant that owes him just a little tiny debt. But the servant can't pay, and so he's furious and he throws him into debtor's prison. And a report reaches the king, and the king is like, what? I forgave you of that insurmountable debt, and you are unforgiving to just this tiny little debt? And holy cow, that parable is strong in lots of areas, but specifically in forgiveness. How can we, who have been forgiven of so much, withhold forgiveness from those beside us? And especially our spouses. We need to dwell on the gospel, think through the gospel. God, you have forgiven me of so much. I need to be generous in my forgiveness with others. And again, not in abusive situations or extreme situations. You need to get out of there and not keep forgiving, as well as like habitual grave circumstances. But In general, the husband who doesn't clean his shoes off for the 100th time, um, those types of situation, we need to learn to be forgiving. And the gospel helps us with that, because the gospel gives us an example. As the gospel infiltrates our marriage, we sin less, and the recovery from sin is quicker. Meaning, a gospel mentality makes it easier for us to forgive, because I recognize, hey, I need to be forgiven as well. I'm forgiven by a loving and holy God, and I've been forgiven by my spouse before. I need to be able to forgive as well. For me, preaching the gospel in the morning to myself helps with that. And the gospel leads to humility, and humility is our friend in marriage and in life. Milton Vincent, in the A Gospel Primer, an excellent book on the gospel and applying it to our life. 13th thought, it says, stimulated to love others. When my mind is fixed on the gospel, I have ample stimulation to show God's love to other people. For I am always willing to show love to others when I am freshly mindful of the love that God has shown me. Titus 3. Also, the gospel gives me the wherewithal to give forgiving grace to those who have wronged me, for it reminds me daily of the forgiving grace that God has shown me. Ephesians 4:32, that says, be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another as God in Christ forgave you. Doing good and showing love to those who have wronged me is always the opposite of what my sinful flesh wants me to do. Nonetheless, when I remind myself of my sins against God and of his forgiving and generous grace toward me, I give the gospel an opportunity to reshape my perspective and to put me in a frame of mind wherein I actually desire to give this same grace to those who have wronged me. Isn't that really good? The gospel changes our perspective. One of my biggest enemies to true forgiveness is self-righteousness. If you look at the parable of the prodigal son, Tim Keller wrote a book called Prodigal God, and that was really good, really helpful as far as the self-righteousness. I can't believe my spouse would do that and think they could get away with it. But we do so much wrong as well. And so if we just sit on our high horse all the time, we are missing the gospel. So in October, when we were on a trip and we had a misunderstanding, we were at a meeting, and I had gotten Anna Claire out of her class several nights in a row, so I was like, Sarah, can you get her out tonight? And I want to talk to someone. And in my mind, it was immediately leave to relieve the teachers of the students. And so we get out, and I see she's talking to someone, which I encourage so much for her to be social. She's a natural introvert. And I'm like, what? Don't you want to talk to people? So, but anyway, it took a few minutes, and I was done with my conversation, and so I went to get Anna Claire, and I was just mad at her. How could you not respect me? And I say to do this anyway, and she was frustrated because it was just a few minutes, and she wasn't even the last student to leave the classroom. It wasn't a big deal, but I made a big deal out of it. Make up these things, she's not respecting me, and you know what, usually there's sin on both sides. Not always, of course, but generally speaking, we are quick to judge the other person, judge the sin in our spouse, and quick to have a good excuse for our own sin. You know, if I have an angry reaction because my wife sinned, what's the difference in the angry reaction or the wife's sin? Both were sinful. But we tend to do that. We tend to justify our own sin. We need to understand from the gospel, we are all sinners. We're all in the same boat. We need to have grace with each other, mercy and forgiveness. And you know what? Recently, with that, it was a conflict, and you do have to talk through things. You can't just pass them by the wayside, I forgive you, and not communicate and work through things. But we can do it in October. We were doing that within the security of our relationship. Our relationship is secure, but there's behavior that's not right that needs to be addressed. Now, I love you, honey. We're going to work through this. It's going to be fine, but let's talk about this. And so we can have a smoother life and not get frustrated so easily. So communicate well, but we need to be forgiving.